please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic
for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Is there anyone here from the public who would like to address the school committee tonight on an item that is not on our agenda? All right, seeing none, we'll move along to the consent agenda. Is there any item that any member of the committee would like to remove from the consent agenda? Could we have a motion to approve the consent agenda as printed?
So moved.
Could we have a second, please? Second by Linda. Any discussion? All those in favor? Thank you very much. I don't have any specific remarks, and I may be duplicating what Shannon's going to say, but I wanted to mention the play, Tuna Christmas, which was a nice, festive, entertaining play. And I also want to remind people that next Thursday, a week from tomorrow night, is the Christmas concert, which is at 7 o'clock, and it's free. Shannon, you have your report?
What'd you say? Oh.
Yeah.
Before I begin, I'd like to say happy holidays. We have a lot of festivities on the December agenda and only 2 weeks until winter break. So to kick off the season, the elementary schools held their holiday concerts last week, where the students in chorus dressed up as reindeer and sang Christmas carols. I know this mainly because my 10-year-old sister, who goes to Pine Grove, has been practicing them in our bedroom mirror for the past month. At the high school, the drama department has been extremely busy as well. Last Thursday, Friday, and Saturday evening, they performed their winter play, A Tuna Christmas, which they've been rehearsing since the fall. The show was very successful, and there were a significant number of students who went out to show their support. Meanwhile, winter sports have also just begun. Tryouts were held last week, and many athletes have their first games in the weeks ahead. Last night in the auditorium, the National Honor Society held their induction ceremony, in which all new members were welcomed to the group. The Foreign Language National Honor Society also just sent out their invitation letters. Admission to the group will be announced in early February. Tomorrow, December 11th, community service members will participate in the Senior Citizens Tea in the library at 8 a.m. That evening, the high school is hosting Y Triton, an orientation which will give students and their parents the opportunity to tour the high school and learn more about the district. On Tuesday, the 16th, we have advisory in the morning. Students will continue to discuss how to use social media to positively promote their peers in school. And then on Thursday, December 18th, we have the high school winter concert at 7 p.m. that will be held in the auditorium. Friday, December 19th, the English department has organized a series of Romeo and Juliet related activities, which the freshman class will be participating in for the first half of the school day. All classes will attend the holiday assembly for F period. And then from Monday, December 22nd to Friday, January 2nd, we have no school for winter break. And the student body would like to say a huge thank you to the committee for those extra days. So that brings us to the next meeting, is that following Wednesday, January 7th. So it's a pretty brief agenda for this month with the break. But if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Does anyone have any questions for Shannon? Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Next item on our agenda is a report on the services for the 18 to 22-year-olds with special needs. Mr. Meek?
Could I just mention
Sure.
that David had a mishap about 36 hours ago and has a number of pieces of metal in his head holding him together. And while I'm sure he's capable of presenting his report, I hope you'll be gentle in your questions.
Did you say metal in his head?
Staples.
That's great.
Okay. We'll be kind.
Well, this must be a test of how not to throw me off before I present, but yeah, I'm okay though.
Go ahead.
Oh, thanks. Just jump right in now. So anyways, before I got to the sort of review of the document that I put together for you, I wanted to just really acknowledge the whole Triton community and campus, because these students in this program have really been accepted and It's amazing how many people in this campus are involved in their programming, from the cafeteria to maintenance to central office to high school offices. So these students are really an integral part of the school. And but when I was thinking about this today, it's also an extra burden on the high school because typically these students would not be in the building. So basically, you know, it takes administrative time. The teacher needs to be evaluated. Their subs need to be called if somebody's out. So, you know, although it's a great idea, and sometimes, you know, the idea is the easiest thing to come up with, wouldn't that be great to start a program? The implementation has been really exceptional in terms of just the way the students have been embraced. So in terms of the history, I think it's amazing that this was almost 2 years ago, but we had a group of students who were completing their high school experience, but were by law entitled to continue their education until 22. So typically in the past, the district had tuitioned these students out into collaboratives or private programs. So it was kind of a perfect storm, if you will, because it was a combination of parents wanting to start it, the high school administration being open to it, the administrative team, and also the school committee to say this, everybody's on board, so let's pull this together, because oftentimes when you start a program, it's an idea, but parents are hesitant, and if it doesn't exist before, some parents don't want to, you know, I don't want my child to be the first one to be in it, but it just, everything doesn't happen often, but everything came together at the right time. So it started off with 3 students, and at that time, we couldn't justify a full teacher and staff for the program. So the teacher who was the life skills teacher took on those extra kids and took on the extra responsibilities. We did contract with a collaborative to help us with some of the transportation and job training. But that was a really difficult year for the teacher, because although it seemed, you know, it's just 3 students, she was kind of doing 2 jobs at once, but she was very graciously did that, and we added the extra support. And then for this upcoming school year, there was approval for a teacher and staffing. So the program is now its own separate program. We did have a discussion about, does this program need to be off-site, because space is pretty tight here. But the teacher and the community were very adamant that they wanted to, you know, keep it here as long as we could. So we actually divided the old program. So there's still the 9 through 12, and then a wall was put up. But so the kids are still separate, but they still can have interactions. It's also, the 2 teachers are working very closely together, because the teacher who is now the 18 to 22 teacher had the kids the previous year. So it really has worked out nicely. So let's see. So currently now there are 8 students in the program. So it grows rapidly. So what we do is every year, and we'll be doing the same thing this year, is as we budget for the following year, we'll be seeing who are those students who are eligible to receive services beyond 18 and plan for them. Let's see. But in terms of really the goal, is really to prepare students for post-secondary education. These are students who are not going to experience college experiences necessarily as a typical student may, but we also do want to develop partnerships with community colleges, so those kids can experience college life, maybe not take a full course load, but have a combination of experiences. Employment, that's obviously the big one. We're trying to prepare them for employment, because once they, you know, 18 is pretty scary for a lot of students, but these students who are probably the most vulnerable, that we really need to plan carefully for them. Increase independent living skills, increase awareness of community resources, and there are some kids who are capable of getting their driver's license, so how to support them in doing that. So in other words, if the parents are having the students go into a driving school, the school might support them in studying for the test, or getting accommodations for them to pass that test. So in order to meet the goals, the activities are, you know, weekly vocational opportunities. So this teacher has now, because she is running the whole program, she's able to go out and make partnerships with community, like Lowe's Bolt Shop, Flatbread Pizza, a couple of local farms. But that itself can be a full-time job, so she's really trying to make those partnerships to allow our students to to go and basically receive some job training and just even to learn what the different fields are. We've had a couple kids who have gone on individual interviews to places, and when we sort of look at the board, and if someone's looking for a part-time person for something, we're trying to get businesses to consider having one of the students do that. Let's see. I mean, there's daily living skills, personal hygiene. There are kids who do participate in some of the classes, selected classes. Kids do work in the Triton store. So I think I'm probably leaving out a lot, but there are a number of opportunities right on this campus that the kids are intimately involved in. We've had some of the students go over to the other preschools and worked as a teaching assistant if someone's interested in early childhood development. So the next steps really are to, are we going to be able to sustain the program on this high school campus? Because as the program grows, its space shrinks, and I think for the kids who are 18 and older, we also want their experience to look different than we just have a program within the high school. I mean, that's why now the students are actually out in the community at least 3 out of the 5 days. So it can't be just we're going to have the kids stay here, but it's going to look exactly the same as high school. But at some point, we may need to look at, does this need to be held off-site? Much to the dismay of the current teacher, but that may be a consideration. Continue to develop partnerships, and sometimes it's really trying to get people who, if you know a business, I mean, speaking to anybody here, if you know a business or someone who's willing to spend a little extra time and give a student a chance, that's sort of the partners we're looking for, because sometimes it's not a match because they're trying to run a business and they either are not interested or don't have the time, but there are those businesses that actually welcome it and accept the students. Develop the partnerships with the colleges. This is going to be, many local colleges are sort of looking at this as an opportunity for them because the law is mandating that we provide these opportunities. So we've gone to visits to North Shore Community College just to see so they have specialized programs to support the kids as well. We've even sent some staff members with kids to participate at some level. Eventually, considering a vocational coordinator, because right now we're sort of the administrative pieces are all being done by the same people. So as this really grows, and if we're talking, 10, 12, 15 kids, that becomes trying to find those placements and experiences is a lot for one person. And then just moving forward, obviously considering the budgetary implications of what we've been really saying is 22 is the new 18 for some students, and it's even going to impact some of the students who have less needs. But these are the students I think right now who are there's no real argument that they're going to need to continue beyond 18. So I don't know if there's any questions.
I have a lot of questions. You said the capacity is going to be 15 at some point?
No, that was just a number. If it gets to be, because right now there's 8 students with a teacher, staff, 3 or 4 staff.
A couple of years, what do you anticipate?
We'd have to go back and really look at, and not every student who turns 18, some parents are making different choices, some kids are at different levels, so it'll really depend year by year to project, probably starting now for the budget presentation, there'll be, maybe some information on how many kids were going to access the program.
Now, do you have your own van? Like, how do you do all these job placements? I used to do job placements, very complicated with only that many people.
We've gone back, the teacher was, when I first met her, she talked to Brian and I and wanted a van. It's just, we contract with our provider, which is actually pretty reasonable. It works out well because these students typically access the community in the middle of the day. So the morning bus routes, the runs are done. The afternoon has not yet begun. So there's that chunk of time we try to take advantage of.
Most of the kids cognitively impaired?
Yes, I would probably say.
You must have kids that you put in that can only stay a couple hours a day. So would you have someone that stays with them for those in the beginning for a couple
You mean in the
hours?
community?
Yes.
It's really the tolerance of the individuals, and that's where we're going to have to get more individualized because different students are going to have different tolerance levels for different experiences. Some some students could probably go in with support, work a full day somewhere. Others, maybe it needs to be shortened and different structure.
Dave, at this point, what's the advantage, aside from the cost, of having kids here as opposed to sending them out?
I think the some of these students, this campus and this community has been their home. They feel comfortable. Say, a student with autism or that's been here for 4 or 5 years that knows the building, knows the routine, wants to be here.
One more question.
Well, the other thing I will say is, and they really are adding to the things they are doing are functional things that would need to be done anyways by a staff member or paying somebody in terms of the cafeteria work they do. So the function, it's not just, the district is not just making up things for them to do to get experience. They're actually contributing to the running of this campus.
Teaching self-advocacy skills.
Yeah,
I hope
that's part of
a
it,
strong
yeah.
part of it, because they really need that as they move
Well, like a
on.
job, if there's an interest of a student, we're going to have them try to make the phone call, fill out the job application, so that's always a part of it.
Does anyone else have any questions?
I just have a question, how you feel this program compares to other 18 to 22-year-old programs with surrounding schools. We're talking school choice all the time, and if we can be keeping students here or choicing them in because we have a great program that somebody else doesn't have, or are we the only ones with this?
More and more schools are doing it. I mean, when I was previously in Newburyport, we had started one in 2005. But so districts have been doing this over time. But of course, I'm going to say it's the best. I think it's solid because the resources are put in there. In other words, if a system just says we want to save money, so we're just going to try to keep the kids on campus, but I mean, we really added a full-time teacher, extra assistants. There's money in there for transportation. Some of the biggest flaws I see in programs is kids don't access the community. They sort of they're on campus, but we have vans that go out 3 days a week. So I think I've also visited some programs, and there's nothing we can't do that other people are already doing. It's more the partnerships. That's the challenge, is getting, and also the other big advantage I missed is if a student, some of these students, this community is going to be their community for a long time into adulthood. So if we're sending a student to Beverly or Danvers, and we're trying to get a job site in Danvers, there's no way they're going to be able to get to Danvers. So by matching them with the community, that's probably the hugest advantage.
May I have a follow-up? Is that all right? There are 8 kids currently in this program, and we have some. I'm just wondering what percentage of the kids who you would like to see in this program or are eligible are participating. It's kind of along Monique's lines about in the next couple of years how many, but do you think 50% of the kids that we wanted to attract to this program are in it now?
I mean,
or are
since we
bringing-
started, I'd say 100.
Oh,
So since
That's
we've had
great.
this available, there has not been
they've
a
chosen it.
family that is, I mean, but we also, a lot of work went into meeting with the families prior, explaining what we wanted to do, and now there's actually something they can see. Because we actually have we had a parent who was actually choosing their child somewhere else, and they heard about it and came back to see it, and they were interested in bringing that student back. So I think it's, yes, so far 100.
Paul?
But I just have a question. Do you think it's possible that the existing guidance department could work with the vocational coordinator, or as a vocational coordinator?
I mean, that'd be maybe in some capacity, but I think as this grows and our responsibility grows, because actually the guidance department is very involved with the special ed students and scheduling them for classes and helping them. The one thing I think we talk about is in the future is making sure, there are at the career day there are other things represented besides colleges. So I think that's certainly they can, but this might be very specific, very intense, hands-on. If you need to go out to a business or show up, and so it could be time intensive. I mean, I'm not saying we're there now, but if it continues to grow, and we also there's very strong laws now indicating that your responsibility is not done when the student is 18, especially if they don't pass the MCAS.
Anybody else have any questions?
So basically, everybody gets in. There's no criteria for
Well,
eligibility.
no, they have to be, I mean,
Yeah.
basically, if there's a student, I mean, this particular group of students are all students who have developmental disabilities or intellectual impairments they completed their high school experience, the 4 years, but did not receive a diploma. They got a certificate of completion. So these are the most vulnerable kids, and these kids are these students in this category are automatic. They're going to need services beyond. So it does get, as you sort of look at students that may have passed the MCAS but may need some skills, I mean, that's another whole area that we have to look at each individual student.
You might have kids that aren't employable, right? I mean, do you have kids that you know are probably at a certain level where they're not going to be employable, but you keep them and teach them like pre-voc
I think
skills?
you got to find the right match for them. That could be, again, maybe not employable to the extent that another student may be, but basically, they can certainly. I
At
think,
least part-time.
Yeah, with the right environment and the right, it's really the structure and support to help them. And really, to be honest with you, it's finding an employer who's willing to go the extra mile or, sort of work a little bit harder, so.
I have one quick question, and it may not be that you need to answer it tonight, but I mean, I'm somewhat familiar with the programs. I think it's a great program. But your last sentence says the district will need to consider the budgetary impact moving forward. Absolutely. But there's a cost savings as well as a budget.
Oh, yeah, for
So
sure.
I think
Yep.
that's, if you don't have the numbers right now, I think that's something that would be really, really important.
Just in
to
general,
include.
if you look at the, in the history section, I mean, it could be up to $60,000 per student plus transportation. So if you do the quick multiplication, you're up, $700,000 for the students we have right now. So really, if you look at the resources we've added have been an extra teacher and a couple of teaching assistants and transportation. So I would say the total cost, I'm looking at Brian, obviously making eye contact with him. With teachers and, we're still well under maybe 150 to 175, I think.
Oh, I just think that's
Yeah.
very important to note
Yeah. Yep.
publicly.
So it's a win-win because the parents want it as well. So everybody's happy at the moment.
Thank you. Does anyone else have any questions? No? All right, thank you very much, David.
Okay, great, thanks.
Anybody who has staples in his head gets to leave.
Oh, boy.
Sit down, Brian.
Okay. The school committee notes the report. Thank you very much. Next, we have an update on the stadium redevelopment.
So I guess my question is, how much detail do you want to go through? I know several were here the other night for can't remember the name of all these meetings, the DCC meeting. So I'm guessing you want just a kind of 30,000-foot,
I
60-second
think
flyover.
that's what I think, and I think if the people who were not at the meeting would like to ask specific questions, they can do that perhaps later.
Okay. Also, to follow up, I have had a discussion with Neil Harrington, the town manager for Salisbury, and I'm playing phone tag with Tracy Blaze, the town administrator for Newbury, in regards to questions they had following up from that meeting. At a very high level, the project has increased about $800,000 due to three significant factors. One was the existing conditions that when it was redesigned, we had to do significantly more earthwork, including a 6-foot high retaining wall that will basically run the length of the field out there against the marsh. Current bids that were open this fall that were historically higher or higher than historical numbers. We're hoping that that goes down when we bid in the spring. In the fall, pretty much everyone's full. No one needed the work, and they were actually telling them that they were floating the numbers high, and they were winning bids. And the last one is we talked about the facilities building. We can do a restroom only for $5 to $550. We can do the entirety of that building for, call it $750 to $8. I think the figure they have right now is $784. As a result of that meeting, everyone agreed to move forward, and I know, Patty, you said that Joe Perry was a selectman from the town of Raleigh, was hoping to be here tonight, wasn't able to, but he wanted to report that similar to the sentiment of the group on last Wednesday evening, that there's certainly some concern to see what's going to happen in FY16. I think everyone around the table is acknowledging tough year to be putting this out there, but he wanted to report that there was still at the Board of Selectmen meeting they voiced their strong support for the stadium project again with concerns about how we deal with this if the costs remain high. But he did want, is that accurate? So at this point, we will by next Friday have what are considered 90% documents, and then by the January 7th meeting, I know that has to be agreed later on in this agenda, we would have the final documents that we would then move forward with zoning and permitting and developing bid documents. Just to note, the structure, the vertical construction, the building is a little bit behind because we were kind of a little bit late to the game on that. The bid documents will be, the stadium proper will be at 90% by next Friday. We gave them the go-ahead based on the information we received and the support we received from the towns last Wednesday to say, yes, we're going to go with the full building, not just the restrooms portion for about 65% of the cost. And I think the overwhelming support was around the fact that to have a full amenities building with a team room with concessions increases the rental capacity pretty significantly. I know there was one thing I wanted to mention. Some folks floated the idea of adding a restroom to the team room, and would it be nominal cost? Easily $50,000, if not more, because you have to, basic is you're bringing restrooms, which adds a whole nother capacity in plumbing, the waste stack and everything else across the entryway. So it would be 50 at a minimum, if not well more than that. So I think everyone agreed that that was not a necessary add-on. So we are proceeding as normal. Again, 90% documents by next Friday. After the holiday on the meeting on the 7th, we will have for you what we believe is the final design for the stadium, and it might be a little bit delayed with the building itself. Any questions?
Does anybody have any quick questions?
Less available gate receipts of $175,000. How good do you feel about that? If we don't have a field to really use, how do we get receipts?
I'm glad you asked that because someone else, Neil Harrington, asked that same question. So the difference between gate receipts and rental income. Gate receipts is basically the receipts from all the games when people go in and pay whatever it is for entry. That's money in the bank. That's a balance that we have right now. I believe the number is, to look at the report, 189. It was 189,000 that we had that we carried into fiscal 15. So we're saying that that's a one-time offset to the construction costs. And actually, you agreed the contract with Gale and Associates, that 135 is at this point being paid out of gate receipts. So that's gate receipts. The rental revenue, that would be in building rental, that would be that separate revolving, and that would be the ongoing costs that we haven't factored any of that into the project itself. The only place that's factored in is the hope that we bring in that revenue that would restore the stadium every 7 years for the surface, every 14 years for the carpet. Does that make sense?
We're going to use those gate receipts for the design and everything that you said, but what do we typically use those gate receipts for?
Currently, we bring in between $45,000–50,000 a year, and that is paying the other half of the athletic director salary right now. So historically, it was half-time, and it was in the general fund budget. When we agreed to move that to full-time, we took the other half, the other 0.5 of his salary is coming out of gate receipts. So that will continue, and that was a funny question when Sean saw that and thought, where's the other half of my salary coming from? So that, what we're spending is the balance that we've carried forward. We're not spending, right, so we continue to generate 45, 50,000 every year, so that continues to support the other half of his salary. The 189 is what we carried. We closed last year with a balance to carry forward. So that's, again, that's one more balance we're tapping out, which is always concerning to be spending all your balances, but it was a necessary evil. Oh yes, we are going on a, we're doing some field work. It is not a field trip, but next Wednesday, so that you have, as a committee, have decided to go artificial turf. We have not made a final determination on the fill. So we are going, I believe, next Wednesday to look at a few different types of fields, field turf, sprint turf. There's all these different brands, and the end product is very different. So I won't go into detail, but we're hoping, I think, three different fields next week, including the Lynn Manning Bowl and a couple other. Lynn Field is just finishing up. Georgetown should be finishing up theirs any day now, so hopefully we'll be able to see theirs. So we're going to go take a look at the different types that are out there. That's a decision that would be made before the bid specs go out in March.
Monique.
Is it possible to bring us back samples of those?
I can bring it down here in my office.
You have it in your office?
I have 3 samples of the carpet, and then I have 2 boxes that show you what the carpet looks like in when it's filled in. Because the carpet, the strands are, I don't know, maybe 4 inches long, 3 inches long, and then they fill it with the sand and rubber and all of that. So I have a couple carpet samples,
I'd like
which
to
is the
see
long
that.
grass, and then I have a couple that are filled in with the rubber, the crumb rubber. That gives you a sense of what the surface would look like.
And also, I don't know if this is out of line, but is it possible to do research on each of those fills so that we can see it, like an objective type of research on each of those? Because I researched the rubber tires, and I didn't really get the rubber fill.
The
And
crumb
I didn't
rubber.
really get the same results as other people.
Okay.
But I think it depends on where you're looking and what you want to find. So I'd like to see an objective view of each of these fills, but I don't know if it's your responsibility to do that or how that works.
I kind of think that's up to us. I mean, I don't know how much we want to ask. Dina and I have done some extensive research, and if you've done some, maybe if you're getting conflicting results to what we've found, then we should share that with each other instead of maybe putting that on the administration.
So I'm not only as a meta-analysis. So you're talking about collecting existing. Obviously, I can't go and do any research on the crumb rubber, but
Like, say you figure out that there's 4 different types that are a possibility. Can you tell us what the research shows about each of those fills? I don't know if this is unreasonable.
well, I mean, I can tell you this. So basically, the discussion comes down to crumb rubber, which is I think Gail said they have filled in 1 field, and it was in one of the W's, and they used, was it Wellesley? And they used, wasn't it a natural? So there's natural, which can be cork, it can be crushed walnut shells, it can be coconut husks. The big concern there is durability, in that it's a natural fiber, so it breaks down. So you're replenishing it all the time. I believe the figures were about 200 to 250,000 more for that fill.
Allergy concern.
And then significant allergy and dust concerns, because I believe you said you have experience with corn. With that dryness, especially in the summer heat, you see like pockets of dust because it's a natural fiber that's breaking down. The second is crumb rubber. There's a lot of research on that, and obviously, again, I shouldn't say a lot because there's not a lot, but that is the item that's being debated right now. From what I can find, there's nothing scientifically conclusive to say it's bad. There's also nothing scientifically conclusive to say it's good, but there's not a lot of research on the naturals. And then the other choice is an EPDM, which is actually what we use for a flat membrane roof. And it's also, it's kind of this category of EPDM rubbers, which includes the Nike Grind, which everyone talks about. And that is, it's not all shoes, but it's basically rubber that was created. EPDM is a rubber that's, I guess, documented for use with human contact. It's basically shoe soles that are ground up. That's about 200 to 250,000 more for the per application. So if we're talking about a $3 million field, that's 3.25 at that point. So those are basically the 3 times the types. You go natural, you go crumb rubber. The most we've heard about is crumb rubber. The natural, I think there's, in talking to Gail and what I've found, there's a lot of research or a lot of promotion to say it's safe because we know the EPDM rubber compound, but there's no research to talk about the durability. So the question is, we know the crumb rubber will likely outlast the carpet because it's tires. There isn't a lot of research to show that your uptick in investment of up to $250,000 is going to last half as long, let alone twice as long, a third as long, who knows how long it will last. So those are the basic three. Is that a fair, between our conversations with Gail, what I've read and talking with folks, that's where I think it comes down to. Those are the three types of options in what people are saying about the outcomes. So the only one that really has a lot of research is the crumb rubber. And
I'll tell you, most of the stuff that I read said, we think it's safe, but we haven't had enough time to really evaluate it. It's just like asbestos,
absolutely.
Everybody thought asbestos was safe, and they convinced people, and it's everywhere. And then all of a sudden, asbestos isn't safe. So I think that's what my concern is. I think we're told that it's safe, but I don't really think it's conclusive that it's safe. And I know it's $250,000. I don't want to be responsible for adding that to the tax rate. But, I also want to make sure because, I've had a lot of personal experiences with things that were once considered very safe and turned out not to be very safe.
And I believe Gail sat at the table and said, no one can give you that assurance right now. That is absolutely a factor. So it's absolutely a factor. Because there's no conclusive evidence. Like I said, there's a lot more talk about the negatives, but there's a lot of studies. But again, that was the exact example they brought up was asbestos. For decades, it was thought to be safe. We now know it's not. That research could absolutely, in 20 years, that could prove to be true. Absolutely. So the value add is the life and the usability of the turf. That's the offset and where everyone's landed.
I just think we shouldn't underestimate some of the studies that have been done, because there have been some pretty intensive studies that have been done under different temperature controls, and obviously nothing is perfect, but I don't want to give the public the perception that studies have not been done, because studies have been done.
Absolutely.
And on kids of all ages and adults, and the ingestion versus just the skin contact, and most of the studies that I read came to the conclusion that the exposure to the crumb rubber under the conditions and the amount of time kids were spending on it were no more toxic than walking around in a city every day. I mean, there are threats around us every single day, and while I think we absolutely have to be responsible about what we put in these buildings and on our fields and everything else, I think it's important not to be alarmists when there isn't evidence, and studies have been done that have made every attempt to find out whether or not this is a threat to people's health and safety. So.
All right, and I think I agree with what Robin said initially. I think that if we want more information, then we can do our own research. And if you find something that you think should be shared with the rest of the committee, let me know. Okay, thank you. Next item on our agenda is to confirm the meetings in January. And our regular school committee meeting is on the first Wednesday of the month instead of the second Wednesday. First Wednesday of the month is January 7th at 7 o'clock. We also will have our special budget meetings on January 12th, 13th, 14th, and 15th at 6 p.m. Those are all public meetings. Does anybody have any questions or comments about those dates? Mary?
In the past, we've been able to condense it into 3 nights. Are we going to look to do that if
I
we can?
almost said 15 if needed, but didn't.
Okay.
Christopher, do you have any comment on the?
No.
Okay. Right. Next, moving along to the report of the superintendent of schools.
Thank you. I do want to add on to this report a brief report from Brian on some bus issues that he has been working on with our transport organization and the schools. In terms of my report, if I draw your attention to my schedule, Kimberly and I visited the robotics class in the high school, in part to have a look at students coding, which means that they are telling computers what to do. that they use it primarily for their robotics class. But just to alert you to the fact that there is a growing interest in whether or not we should be teaching coding at a much earlier level than high school. Newbury has an after-school class in coding at the moment. There's been a lively discussion within the office here between us three as to whether we're really technology users or technology controllers. And we have to do some work to determine whether or not this is something that we should be paying attention to in the earlier years. Obviously, the big question, if it's valuable, then how do we fit it in? Who teaches it? How does a student's experience of coding progress from elementary through upper elementary, middle school, and into high school? So my purpose of mentioning it is simply to kind of put it on your radar as something that we're talking about.
May I ask a quick question? Is that what we used to call programming?
Yes.
Thank you.
And there's discussions as to whether it's a language or something else. In terms of my schedule, I should add that the high school National Honor Society induction to that list. I can claim, in terms of my upcoming evaluation, that in the Swampscott game, our kicker kicked 7 out of 8 goals. In the Swampscott defeat, I take a good deal of pride in that. Good for Max. In terms of correspondence, it's here for your information, but I have put round the table a spreadsheet with a number of coloured columns on it. The correspondence you have within the agenda provides information on the enrolment of the Whittier Technical Vocational High School over a number of years from a number of different districts. My concern, as I think you know, is that I feel that many students who could benefit from a vocational technical high school education do not get the opportunity. What this paper does is demonstrate the difference between the actual enrollments over a 5-year period and what the enrollments would be if the enrollments were related simply to the size of the applying group of students. And over a 5-year period, if each district got a proportionate share of the places, we would have had 2 more. Amesbury would have 28 more. Georgetown would have 5 fewer. Ipswich would have 8 fewer. Newburyport would have 1 more. And Pentucket would have 19 more. Now there's clearly a whole lot of things playing on this. I have done a statistical analysis, applied what's called a chi-square test, which is a statistical analysis that determines whether or not the difference between the theoretical distribution and the actual is statistically significant, and there's only between a 1 in 100 and a 5 in 100 chance of these differences being due to chance. So there's something else going on here. Clearly, it has to do with the ability of the group which is applying. In the case of the districts with very small numbers, that they probably have some of their strong students applying and get in. This really needs further work. Interestingly, almost simultaneously, Joanna True, who is one of our representatives on the Whittier board, had asked the school for similar information because she had heard from the administration of our middle school that they were concerned that some of our students who would benefit were not getting in, and we've agreed that we will meet with, I think they're going to include the Rowley representative, me and the middle school administration to talk through how we can maybe better prepare our students for admission into the vocational high school. So this is a work in progress at the moment, but on the face of it, we don't appear to be doing particularly badly on the basis of the information we currently have. Can I just stop there in case there are questions on that?
Does anyone have any questions on that? Monique?
No, it's the median SGP for literacy at 8th grade. I took that as the best single piece of data to describe that. Yes, the whole of the 8. Yes. So Triton's is 49. The 50 is the state average. If you graph the success of applicants against low income, that there is a pretty strong correlation between relative success from the school of the bigger entries. Pentucket is much the strongest and has a relatively low percentage of students coming from low income families as compared with ourselves and Amesbury. It's difficult to compare because some of the number of applicants is really quite small, and it's probably difficult to generalize. So I think this is generally reassuring, but I'm still interested in trying to have fewer parents contact me in the fall to talk about why their child who would benefit has not got in. That's why I think that one of the things we need to do is to when we get to a later agenda item, consider advocacy for the students who would benefit from this kind of education, that they would leave us, we would finish up with a smaller group of students here. The alternative is for the state to find the fundings for all high schools to provide a stronger vocational element than we are currently able to do. Gloucester High School has 5 Chapter 74, which are kind of genuine state-recognized vocational programs. So that there are opportunities in that kind of setting, but they have 400 more students than we do, and the state, I think, has been looking to rationalize vocational education opportunities rather than expand them. But I just thought you'd find this interesting in terms as people talk about access to that opportunity. I'd like to talk about ST Math, but maybe we could do that at the end, because otherwise it will I'm going to show you, with your permission. When it says I propose to reintroduce ST Math, it means to the committee, not more broadly. So maybe we could take that at the end. You'll know that we're surveying family perceptions of homework policy at the present time, and you've got a note here about the progress that we're making in terms of grading in secondary schools. I did circulate to you under separate cover a timeline. It was in an email which was copied to you, looking to bring to you the outcome of a policy review in April. I think there's going to be some heavy lifting between now and then. The Chief Academic Officer has been pressing me to consider talking with students about their experience of grading, and this afternoon I caved and said I would do that, and we will. I really think this is a matter for the adults rather than students, but nonetheless I think it's right to ask students about their experience. A note here about a Massachusetts Health survey. What's unfortunate about this survey, like quite a number of others which are undertaken by the federal government and others, is that we don't get any data out of it, which is unfortunate. I really think that if we're going to have a survey, it ought to provide useful data for us. I haven't brought it with me, but we do now have a District Section 504 manual, which encapsulates best practice as guidance for schools, which Kimberly has put together with the assistant principals and under the guidance of the law firm of Nuttall and McAvoy. Chromebooks, nearly all our educators have Chromebooks. Initially, a few of them said we don't really want them, but then I think when they saw what others could do with them, they've changed their mind, and we now only have a very small number who have not collected them. I'm sorry to say that Diane Barrett has moved on to a more senior position in the private sector. Those of you who know her to be a very charming, personable, and helpful member of our staff. She was actually overqualified for the job she was doing, and has now gone on to something which is more of an appropriate challenge for her. We've been lucky to recruit Karen Denon, who happens to have an MBA. Is that right? Who's a mom who's looking for a job locally, and I'm sure is going to be a good addition to our central office staff. Brian, being considerate, as we reported before, trying to make it easy for our staff to get the fingerprints that they're required to have, is arranging for some central opportunities, so they won't have to hike off to Tewkesbury or somewhere in order to have their fingerprints taken. Brian, maybe you could just briefly reference the discussions you've been involved with in terms of our relations with bus drivers.
Yes, very briefly. We have been working with NRT for 5 years. We're currently in the process of rebidding that contract. We had a pre-bid meeting, and Salter and NRT were the only ones that showed up for the pre-bid. There were others that have pulled bids, so we'll see if there's other competition. But we've been meeting with NRT to try and open the lines of communication. We've been having a challenge with drivers. Drivers are making significantly less on our routes than they are on Masconomet Tri-Towns routes, because they're prevailing wage rates out of the same terminal here in Newbury. So there's been a hard time keeping qualified drivers interested in driving our routes. We have a great group of drivers right now, and I think there's been some ins and outs that have created some animosity, and then there's been a lack of communication, whether that's on my part, our part, or otherwise. But we've been meeting, we've met individually rather than as a group with the administrators. We've been meeting building by building with the dispatcher, the owner, their HR director, some drivers, to just open the lines of communication, and I think it's already made a difference. And so I'm pleased to see that, and it's tough when you contract for transportation and they're not district employees, but we own students. We all own students from the moment they step on that bus stop to the moment they walk off at the end of the day. So it has to be an us. It can't be a we them, and it's very easy when you contract with an outside group to have it become a we them. So we're working on that, and I would say out of the 3 meetings, and there's one more to go, it's been very positive. And kudos to them, kudos to our staff and administration, because driving a bus is not an easy thing to do. And when you've got these buses with 50, 55 students, and I don't know if you've been on a bus recently, but the newest models, the seats are probably 1.5 feet taller than when you and I rode the bus. And so now, if you're looking at the elementary run, if you sit down and look, you don't see anyone till about the 3rd row from the back where the 6th graders are, because everyone else is too short and you can't see. So it is just, it's a very challenging role. So we're doing better in supporting them and making sure they're part of our team. So.
Okay, are you willing to be exposed to our new technology? I may need Brian's help in doing this. By way of preface, this is not the commercial that I tried to show you before. You're going to hear a very precocious little girl demonstrating the use of this program, and basically she's going to be showing the use of the program, helping students to come to grips with adding fractions. If it wasn't for her voice, there would be no language involved whatsoever. This program is all about creating visual problems for students to develop mathematical responses to. I was looking one this afternoon. I don't know if you've had a chance to look at it. There's one showing how they're teaching pre-algebra, teaching linear equations, and all the time they're beginning with visual problems before they would get to x's and y's and z's and equals. I personally think it's very powerful. To introduce it program-wide will be very expensive, but I really think we ought to look at it very carefully in terms of providing intervention support for students who really find math very difficult. So I'm going to walk across there and try and start this.
This is the new setup. Remember we talked about the new
Yes.
setup?
Yes.
It's done.
Alright, hey guys. This is a program called ST Math. Yep. Some of you might know what it is, and some of you might not, but it's a program.
The goal is to get the penguin across the screen.
It's for everyone that supposedly does it. So sometimes I cut the penguin's head off. And the penguin is called Gigi. So we're just doing a couple of problems. I thought about making a video of this. So here it is. Here is some. It's about my new LPS series. I think I've already made enough videos on that, so I think might do. Anyway, episode 2 is coming out soon. Yes, this is widescreen. It's run by my district. It's not that hard, really. Just takes forever. Now, again, the Penguin's ID, it has all these steps of math. And once you finish one, this thing goes up. Watch. Let's just do this stupid problem. Yeah. So, yeah. Yet I still have problems. I'm so deranged. I mean, yeah, it's called SE Math. I don't know if I can or not, but there's a certain code, you have to get into it, teach it. I mean, if you don't know what it is and you want to try it, you can.
To explain, if she had got one wrong, the penguin would not have been able to progress. And I don't know why the screen's cutting it off, but she gets a running record in the bottom of what percentage she's got right. So she's all the time getting feedback in terms of success.
So, yeah. I'm working on fractions right now. So, yeah. Dang dogs barking. Honestly, I don't know what to do. I mean, I remember this from like the last year I did. It's hard, especially once you go into like forward, backward, forward, backward, forward, forward, backward, backward, backward. I mean, really. Well,
opportunity, and it's a bit like having visual manipulatives, but it's all happening in front of you. And I'm certainly interested in looking to see whether or not this is something that would be helpful to students who are really struggling. Looking at what I saw earlier today about linear equations, again, they were taking you from the practical to the numbers, and I think it might make a difference. So this is just to whet your appetite for blended learning. Okay, that's all I have to report on. If you have questions about the report or any other matters, I'd be happy to try to answer them.
I'm sorry, Monique.
Monique has a question. Christopher, this is nonverbal now. How do kids know what to do when it starts? What are the instructions?
There really aren't any. They're presented with.
Really?
For example, if I'd shown you the commercial one, they start with 3 ostriches, each of which has 2 feet. They usually do. And there are multiple numbers of shoes, and they have to work out how many shoes they need out of maybe a dozen to get shoes on each of these ostriches. And so there's a kind of little introduction, and after that they're on their own. Clearly, a teacher is supporting this.
This is to be used to be in support of what goes on in a classroom?
Not necessarily, no.
No?
There
Is
are
this the main
some districts
instruction?
where it is an essential part of the program for all children.
I can see where this might be difficult for disabled kids, like kids that have a math disability. Because I know the answer obviously, but I was getting confused about what they wanted you to do with this. I could see where a kid would go 1/2 plus 1/2 equals 2/4, and then there's nobody to correct it, and you just keep getting the wrong answer. And how do you know to go forward?
Partly by experiments, by trial.
So you
and
just
error.
keep experimenting, but how do you know what the logic is to it? I mean, eventually you're going to get the right answer, but how do you know?
If you get something that works,
Yeah,
you
how do
begin
you?
to see what it is that's working, and their belief is that this helps to develop an understanding of math concepts better than starting with numbers and then going to the concept afterwards.
What does the research say about this?
Well, the program is developed by a company called Mind Research. The man who started it was dyslexic himself, and so what they've tried to do is take the language out of it and give people a very kind of practical understanding of mathematics. I mean, they can do work on quadratic equations. They go right the way through 8th grade, and they provide intervention into high school in their programming. Well, I could have shown you the commercial, but they've got data from quite a number of districts across the authority that say of the nation that say it's made a huge impact on narrowing the achievement gap, and it's shown remarkable levels of growth in districts which have used it. I mean, the other benefit is children can access this whenever they're awake, wherever they are, where they have Wi-Fi. Yes. Yeah. I mean, obviously you can see examples online.
Dina?
I have questions on other things, so if
Oh.
somebody has specific questions to this math program,
Oh,
I'd let them go first.
Just a quick question about the cost to just buy access to the program for teachers to use instead of implementing it across the board. What does that cost?
It's expensive. So from what I have researched, it's about $100 per student. So it is very costly. So I think, there is definitely a population of students where could really benefit from this.
Mhm.
And I actually, Monique, when I first saw this, because I'm not a real visual learner, and so I really had to go back to see how the program was, how it started with students, how you introduced it. And so there are a couple different ways. So for example, if you have a teacher who has a main lesson, they could easily show the visual and then have some concrete manipulative tips, and then a follow-up session where in the instruction, the language gets taken out of it, so then all you have to work with is the visual. Because even when you have manipulatives in front of you, you still are trying to use language to explain how to use them and how they get integrated, where something like this, it's all visual. So if you're not a visual learner, this is uncomfortable. And so that for me was part of the issue. And I have looked at other supplemental math programs, and all of them are so language based. So you have a kid who's drowning in the words and can't see the conceptual component, and the computer based kind of math supportive programs don't help them at all. They actually make it worse, because then there's all these buttons they can click on, and there's language, and so to me this was a great bridge for those kids who, because of their language disabilities, have really major setbacks, when truly, if it was taught in a different way, they would be better able to do that.
Kim, check me. 75% of us are visual learners.
I'm not sure, but we are.
It's in that order. Mhm.
Well, I was just going to say $100 is not a lot of money if it gets a kid up to grade level, and math is so building. These kids could be going out of district, and that would cost a lot more.
I don't want to belabor this, but is this going to be aligned with the new math curriculum that we're going to, this is,
Absolutely, this
yeah.
is all. So we actually put a child on this computer program to meet wherever they are, and wherever if they have gaps or misunderstandings, you can put them there. Plus, this goes up to, I want to say, 8th grade, which is, it's unheard of to find something that is conceptually based and visual to support kids in that higher level thinking, because that's where we're going with the Common Core, so it's all aligned. It's perfect.
These people are out of University of California, Davis. It's got a research base to it.
Are there any
Well,
more
I can send you some material.
any more questions about this math presentation? Dina, you have questions about other parts of the superintendent's
I had a question on the youth health survey. Is that going to require parental permission to participate in?
Parents would have opportunity to withdraw. Yes.
Okay, good. The last question I had was, in the Salisbury School Council minutes, they were referring to fundraising for Partridge Park. Can somebody fill me in on more detail of that?
I believe that's the park that's being developed behind the school.
But is that town-owned, or, I guess...
The property?
Right.
Yes.
So why are we doing fundraising for that?
We aren't. The school is interested because it will be a facility usable by the school and by the community. We as a district are not raising funds.
Okay. Okay, maybe that wasn't clear when I read those minutes. Thank you.
it's going to be a public facility for the city of Salisbury, town of Salisbury.
Paul?
Ms. Farmer, I just have a general question. When a student's receiving SPED services and the district makes a decision to go to due process, is that a decision that's made by Mr. McGee, by you, or by the district's attorney?
Typically, the administrator of special education brings those cases to one of our Monday morning meetings, and we talk it through. He reports the advice that we get. We've got from our special education attorney, and some of you met her at the MASC conference, and we look at it on its individual merits as to how we best proceed.
But it's a group decision then?
Yes. Sorry?
Are there any other?
Yeah, I say we involve our legal counsel because she has the best sense of the probability of success.
Are there any other questions on the superintendent's report? Next item on our agenda is the mid-cycle review of the superintendent of schools. Hopefully everyone's had a chance to look over the Annex 9. Mr. Farmer, would you like to say anything? And does anyone
Well,
have
to
any-
remind you that this is an opportunity to essentially to discuss progress towards
Right.
my goals over the 80 days that I've had to work on them since you approved them. I really don't understand why capable teachers have a 2-year evaluation cycle, and my senior administrators have a 2-year cycle, but I have a 1-year cycle, bearing in mind that many of the goals which I set or you set are not typically achievable within that time frame. What I have done is to attach a summary of developments associated with the goals that were set last year and amended at the start of this year. I've taken out all the prior history just to concentrate on what's been happening this year. You'll see here evidence that we continue to develop DDMs. Kimberly worked with special education teachers earlier in the semester, and we now have those. We will be completing work on specialists on a professional development day early in January. I continue to work with the Teachers Association on outstanding business. We have had documentation now for probably a year, which would be a draft agreement, but there are issues that still need to be resolved. There are issues like if a child is in my class, what level of attendance does the child have to have if that result is counted as part of my outcomes? So there's an attendance issue. There's an issue about when did the student enroll in the class. If I'm teaching a full year class, is it reasonable to say that the student should be enrolled by the 1st of October, which is our kind of first counting date, which is a month into a year class? Would it be reasonable to say that the student had to be enrolled in by the end of the first 2 weeks in a semester class, and by the end of the first week in a quarter class? We have quarter classes in the middle school. We've been having a robust discussion about if we're talking about attendance, if students are withdrawn for special education services, are they part of the class at that stage? I believe they are. If they go on college visits, does that count as an absence? I think not. If they go to camp, are they part of the class? I think they are. And so we've been having some discussions around that, and I met with the what's called the E-board, the executive board. Let me think of the date. It was very short notice 2 days ago, and I think we're reaching an understanding about that. We're also discussing the language around it, because the language at the moment says, Mr. Lees, you've been working very hard this year, and you have got a median growth such that your typical student has made a year's growth, and we are going to regard that as a moderate success. Now, I think that's a terrible way to describe the product of a year's work. That if people have been working hard to get their students to progress a year's growth, and that is good progress. That is good progress. So I'm discussing with them some alternative language that is more respectful of the effort than to say you've done moderately well by doing your job. So there are these things which are still around. The other conversation that I started with the E-board the other day and continued this morning with our curriculum central office staff is to begin to think about where we really want to get to. We've tried to do more than be compliant by saying this is an opportunity to really think through what makes for good assessment that would inform all our assessments, not just district determined measures. I think we're heading in a direction of looking to improve our assessments, improve our grading arrangements, such that instead of taking some I'm talking about people now who are not teaching math and ELA, where they get a state student growth percentile. I'm talking about the other kind of 80% of teaching, where I'd like to think that as we assess a teacher's impact, we look at the work over the whole year, the way students have improved over a whole year, rather than taking some snapshots, which is what the district determined measures are likely to be, so that instead of feeling that this is a kind of state-imposed arrangement, we make it something that we own and is an integral part of our day-to-day work, rather than feeling that there are these special DDMs that we have to pay particular attention to. That's very recent thinking, hasn't gone very far yet. Certainly not widely amongst the administration, but it's something that we need to have a look at. In terms of the DDM thing is mixed up with the whole grading issue as well, and you'll see that the references here to the work that we've been doing on that. It seems odd to think that these discussions around grading go back to 2011, convocation 2012, convocation 2013, and now I think it's time that we need to square up and deal with this. We've put a survey out to families and teachers about the non-academic traits of students that we value and would want to nurture and support, and that is out there now. And so I'm hoping that we can at least start the process of improving grading, because at the end of the day, separating the non-academic from the academic is a starting point, and that would include being very clear about the use of a 0 when work is not done. It should be an incomplete. If work is not done, the response should be to have the child do the work. That should be the response. I think we need to be much smarter about saying this is a student behavior which is not contributing to success. So how do we respond in an appropriate way to that behavior? I've been identifying more YouTube snippets from experts in the field of grading, and I think we're going to put some out on the website and to teachers to help them think through that. There's one expert who likes to talk about you put students in a hole. If you start giving 0s for incomplete work, you can put a student in a hole, and you look into the hole and see how you're doing down there. Our reaction should be, how do we get the kid out of the hole? Not that it's your fault that you're in there. So it really is asking people to think very differently about grading. I think we're making some decent progress on that. On page 3, there's a check there of where we are through the implementation of this work. Down the line, we will come to a point where we will ask the same question that we're asking of elementary school teachers: are we reporting against specific standards? That is not on the agenda at the moment. I think we need to take this in manageable steps, and in terms of providing decent, actionable information to students, teachers, and families, that the separation of the academic from the non-academic is the first big step. Beyond that, we need to look at extending standard-based reporting. And I have to say to you, I know that the Teachers Association is going to do its own review of the implementation of the elementary program, particularly I think in terms of, does this require more work and effort on the part of teachers. I keep talking about working smarter rather than working harder, but that doesn't always gain traction. shall I stop there? I've got to the end of goal 1 and see if you have questions, advice, comments about that.
Well, you mentioned earlier, and I was happy to hear that you did cave into Kim about surveying students, because I really think these are the people we're dealing with, and they know better than anybody whether they feel things are accurate, not accurate. Kim and I talked a little bit today. I mean, maybe it's a little round table with just having a conversation with kids, not the survey. I don't know how effective the surveys may be, if it's just to everybody and what attitude they might have about it. But I think they are worth talking
But
to.
my caving extended to as far as having some focus groups. I have to manage the politics of student surveys in the broader sense. I have to deliver student surveys of teacher performance. And you have to pick your battles, and therefore I want to go lightly on this survey, because I think that the truth is self-evident. Really, anybody who thinks about this, you wonder why people don't agree. And so I think it's less important to have much student here when we've got to arrange a methodology for students to report on teacher performance as a whole. That's a much bigger issue, and therefore I think one's got to kind of respect the amount of feelings that teachers have that their students are going to be publicly talking about their work.
I
mean that's my thinking.
Yeah. I just also wanted to say that this book that you gave us a couple months ago, I haven't read the entire thing, but I was glad you gave that to us, because it really does provide a lot of insight. And then the only other question I had about the grading was your thinking about progress reports, because at least at the high school level, I find them to be, thank you to the couple of teachers who actually bother to type in a little code to say one thing or another, but I just find them to be pretty much useless, because they don't report specifically on grades. Some may be more specific about areas of weakness or strength, but what is the expectation by the administration or what is the expectation for teachers that progress reports are even on their radar?
I think the practice is that we do it because we have to. I want us to get to a stage where whenever we report on students' progress, we are reporting what I call actionable information, knowledge. What is it that we have to do to help this student improve? And it may be academic, and very specifically academic, or it may be nothing to do with academics at all, but just getting their life organized and managing their time and so on. If we don't provide data that's actionable, we may as well not provide it.
So
I think you're talking, Mrs. Williams, about getting a report that, what do I do with this? It doesn't tell me very much, and it doesn't guide me as a parent as to what conversation I should have with my child to help the child get its act together, or focus on particular elements of the work that they may not much enjoy. But in life we all have to knuckle down to bits of life that we don't much enjoy in the real world.
Yeah, so I just kind of wonder what our policy will be. Will progress reports kind of then get pulled into this whole grading evaluation thing and then be utilized more effectively?
Yes. I have to recognize there are also contractual issues in all of this.
Deb, can I ask a follow-up question on Robin's comment? As far as the progress reports go, once everybody is using X2 and parents are accessing that, do you think that progress reports will be unnecessary, in that parents would have accurate, up-to-date information about their student at any given time, and then it would be up to the teachers to, well, more so with behavioral issues or something else, to point out to the parents that although your child might be getting an A in my class, he's disruptive?
I think that should happen. If there's concern about a student's progress, serious concern. I believe there should be contact with the family initiated by the teacher, not relying on parents checking.
Oh, agreed, but I'm just saying that parents would have that opportunity so that there should always be that continuous
Right.
ability to go back and forth.
I think we need to be realistic about just how far we can provide real-time grades in school. Our teachers fulfill a great variety of roles, and I think it's reasonable to expect that grades be updated on a regular basis and a frequency to be agreed. But I think it's very difficult to expect all teachers to have a real-time grade available. Teachers have very different family commitments. Teachers have very different commitments in school, after school, in terms of the time that they devote to students in a variety of ways. And so teachers' days do differ. And my concern is that if we made having the Aspen grade book available in real time, that we would lose a lot of other things which we think are very valuable. I don't have a prescription as to where we should get to. We've started with the current contractual arrangement. We need to build on that. But I don't know. I encourage others to join the conversation. This notion of doing everything in real time. I mean, one of the issues around grading is what do you do with student work that is late. We have this expectation for adolescents that their work is always in on time. Is your work always in on time? Is my work always in on time? No, the real world is not like that. We need to know that people are making their best effort, and if they've got some reasonable explanation for why a particular thing hasn't been the top priority, I think we need to recognize that is the real world. I would be interested to know if all your work is always in on time. That would be encouraging to know. But I know that mine is not, and that is because at any one time there's a range of priorities. It only requires one child to have some particular needs during a day, and a caring teacher will devote time that could be devoted to doing things right rather than doing the right thing. And I'd rather have people doing the right thing than always thinking about doing it right. Now, that may be controversial, but
I'm agreeing with that. I'm just saying that, and I think like anything else, it would take time to get all teachers on board with using, an online grading book. But I'm just saying that I think that it's something to consider, that as we move forward with using that program and more teachers get more comfortable, it's going to be easier for both sides to have a better picture more often of how a student is doing. And I agree with you, Christopher, that if there is an issue, it shouldn't be the parent necessarily picking that up, although it might be. They might look at something and say, why are your grades dropping? And they start the conversation. Maybe they have to accelerate that conversation to the teacher level, but it should be a two-way street, I think.
Anything else on goal 1?
I've seen a difference between last year in the high school and this year with having Aspen. It does start a conversation, because I've had a few issues with the Aspen, and I've emailed the teacher, and they've right away communicated to whatever the issue may be. So I think the grading is getting much better with Aspen.
shall I go on to goal 2? There's less to say about this. I am reading as opportunity allows. An important part of the district development plan was the implementation of a group to have a look at the issue of blended learning. The president of the TRTA is currently identifying representatives of the association to join a small group of district administrators to work on that. So that really has been on the back burner so far. The emphasis has been on moving forward on the grading. On the district, I don't know if you have questions about that. There's not much that I have to report. Shall I go on? The district development plan related goal is to do with the evaluation system. It's a little bit back to front in terms of the timeline, but you'll know that we did review Pilot 2, came to an agreement about adjustments to that. You have approved those adjustments, which we are now putting in place. Obviously, there'll be a further review of Pilot 3 in the late spring of next year. On the student and staff surveys, very little so far has been done on this beyond gathering some helpful literature together and having a formative discussion with the teaching and learning leadership team. We have had a discussion around maybe trying to introduce the teacher survey on administrators as the first thing we do, so that teachers have an opportunity to participate in a survey of our work before we get to a point of talking about students responding to a survey on teacher performance. Probably one important aspect of that discussion has been who sees the results of the surveys. There is an argument that essentially that the survey should be information for the teacher that may become the basis of a discussion with the supervisor, that the outcome of that survey need go no more public than that. The argument being that it's the teacher's survey, that they hold it. The district can ask for it if it chooses to ask for it, but it doesn't become a matter of public discussion. If those surveys are going to be useful, that they're going to be useful as a basis of a discussion rather than, I think, of a judgment. In any class of students, there are going to be students who think that the teacher walks on water, and others who really are completely disengaged. And how we do we discount the walks on water and the completely disengaged, and look at the middle? I don't know. We need to think that through. But what is important is that whatever we introduce finishes up as being a positive experience for people. So work in progress. So that's goal 3, and I have added, though not required to, a quick review of progress on the various aspects of the district development plan, where there has been movement to date. That's on page 2.
Does anybody have any questions on any Monique? I think you both need to get your microphones closer to your mouths.
So we certainly do walkthroughs, but also through informal meetings such as math specialist meeting, reading specialist meetings, regular meetings with the differentiation specialists, just to kind of keep updated on some of the projects that are happening, and looking at the assessment results and the data to what it shows as far as at-risk students and so on and so forth. So you definitely start to see evidence, and also within the administration, just making sure principals are aware of what does it look like and what should you be looking for as far as what is differentiation, because there's many different understandings and perceptions of what it is and what it's not. So
But one thing we have done this year is, after 2 years in which we failed to generate useful data out of the evaluation system, because we asked for a report on a whole standard, this year we're asking supervisors to focus on, very specifically, on 1 or 2 indicators within the standard that would demonstrate whether or not teachers are differentiating. I mean, it was, I was dismayed by the outcome of the first 2 years, where on the basis of the question we asked, 96% of teachers were proficient in differentiation. Now, I know that that's not true. And so we've tightened the question within the evaluation arrangement to try to get a better handle on that. And at the same time, Anna Bates is, I think, working, she's making good relationships with teachers and doing good work. And I'm sure that that work will be productive.
Any other questions on the superintendent's mid-cycle review? All right, thank you very much. Next on our agenda are the subcommittee action items. First will be the Finance Subcommittee. We have the Treasurer's Report to receive and file the Treasurer's Report for October 25th, 2014.
So the only reason we're looking at this Treasurer's Report as a full committee, as opposed to us recommending that it be received and filed as part of the consent agenda, is that when we looked at it 3 weeks ago, the third page, which is page 56 in your packet, 2 columns were inverted. It was printed up incorrectly. It was showing, I think FY15 annual budget was flipped with the year-to-date, if I'm remembering correctly, and the percentages were all off. We just looked at it and it was just ridiculous. We had overspent by like...
It was the, under expenditures, it was the salary and non-salary that were swapped. So the
not
figures...
revenues, right, expenditures.
below.
So it just kind of nullified the whole report, and we really just couldn't deal with it as it was. So we just had it reprinted, and we're bringing it to the full committee. And there were, even as we talked about it, there were no standout issues at the time. It was just printed incorrectly, and so we need to review it now as a full committee. If anyone has any questions about it?
Could we have a motion to receive and file the Treasurer's Report for October 2015 as presented in your packet?
So moved.
Is there any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Thank you very much. Next is to consider a preliminary preliminary report on the FY16 expenditure estimates.
Oh,
I'm happy to do it. You want to?
I'm going to let Brian run through it as he did for us, but basically this report does not even consider any changes to revenues. This is just what we're looking at as pretty much expected increases in expenditures. So.
Yes, and nervous about passing out any piece of paper that makes it look like this is a proposed budget. But and just to note, today I listened to folks from Department of Ed, Michael Widmer from Mass Taxpayers, and just kind of beginning to talk about FY16. And you remember the governor, a new governor, has an additional 30 days to produce a budget. There's nothing set in stone, but folks are fairly confident that Governor Baker is going to take the 30 days, which means that his initial budget, the first figures that we'll have from the state, are going to be being produced at the end of February. So we will be producing a tentative budget. You will be voting a tentative budget with absolutely zero guidance from the state. So just to set the scene of how tricky this year is going to be. Just to go over this sheet very briefly, just outlining the known fixed costs. Compensation, and again, you can see the breakdown of various categories. That's just, some of those are, anything contractual, that's obviously contractual. Other items such as the 2% for anyone not in a collective bargain agreement, that is negotiable, but just those are the figures that were used as far as setting some projections. Transportation, the second box down, I did mention we are opening bids next Thursday. Once we have the bids, again, we know the cost of labor is going to go up. That is a big driver. The cost of vehicles is going up because it's more costly to retrofit vehicles to meet with the new emission standards. It's more costly to retrofit them than it is to just lease a new vehicle. So we'll open bids next Thursday. From there, I do believe there's some potential to trim some runs. That won't be represented in the bids. That would be some work that we would have to do with the successful bidder. It would not change our bus stops. It would keep all the bus stops intact. It would just, I think on probably two of the elementary schools, we would remove a single tier run, and it would just put those existing stops. If there are 10 buses, we'll use Salisbury. If there are 10 buses doing those existing stops, we would use 9 buses. So rather than some buses having 15, 20 students on them, we would fill them to capacity. Might add 10 minutes, 15 minutes to a run. But at $40,000 per run, that's a quick $80,000. So I'm using a figure now of a 20% increase. That's very realistic. I'm hoping the bids come in less than that, and then on top of that, we'd be able to trim a couple runs, which would save the $70,000 to $80,000. Again, it could save $100,000 depending on what the bids come in at. We don't know what the bid runs will cost. So just to remind you, it's a sealed bid. We have to take the lowest bidder. Our only option then is to say, no, we don't want them, and to rebid. So bidding transportation is a science. There's not a lot of wiggle room. Health and dental, I'm assuming 7.5% right now. That is industry trend. Crystal ball from our representative we use group benefit strategies. We pay an independent vendor to look at plans with us and for us and advise us and do our required reporting. We're trending better than that as a group with our something like 1,900 lives covered on our plans. So that could come in 3%, 4%, and obviously, as you can see, 7.5% is coming up on $400,000. So every percentage point is significant dollars. So hopefully, by the time we get to budget, tentative budget, we'll have a better number than that. I would be shocked if it were worse than that. I would say that. Electricity, you remember 2 years ago, we locked rates and saved $160,000, $150,000. You see that $150,000 were given back. That rate lock is ending in July, actually June 30th. So as of July 1, we were at 11.03 cents per kilowatt hour. You can see we're going from our current 6.5 cents to 10.69. So not quite back up to the 11.03, but that would be a new 2-year lock. And then we'll see what happens beyond 2 years, because if it continues at this pace, we're going to be paying significantly more than that. Natural gas, we have locked again. We're locked right now through November. This would relock us as of next November through 2017. Again, it's going to go from $763 to $960. That's an additional $60,000. Those 3 categories: transportation, electricity, and natural gas. We were lucky to ride the wave of savings. We currently have the lowest transportation rates in the state, or second to lowest, if that's changed. So we're more getting in line to where everyone else has been paying. We're paying, call it $217 per bus per day. There are places paying $425, $419, $372 per day. So even if we go up 20%, we're still at a very low cost for those items. Savings on choice out. Some very happy news. I don't think we're ready. No, Patty's shaking her head. Patty, the school choice data queen. We don't have confirmation from the state yet, and our friend Roger Hatch, but generally by late December, we get those reports. From what we can find, and again, from everything we do to beat the pavement, there are students who we don't know about who choice out, and we never see them. But right now, it looks like we are under 100 students choiced out. And we're at about 189 as of today, 189. So we're 89 students plus to the good. Again, we have one choice student, significant $300,000 cost in Newburyport that is skewing the dollars to match the head count. But I'm hopeful that we'll have about $125,000, if not $150,000 savings on choice out. That's tuitions. We would save that this year as well. So this is projecting for next year. We'd be able to trim that cost this year. And then we've talked about some significant special education cost increases. Transportation at this point right now is looking like it's going to be about a $200,000 overage for this year. We have identified additional circuit breaker funds. We've identified other tuition funds that we have that, you know, the Finance Subcommittee looks at every single month, and we have them there waiting for the day that we need them. It's looking like we're going to need them. Again, this can change. Things change like that. I can tell you one run, and something just changed where we had a student change a location, and we're dropping a run. So just like that, a full year of, call it $45,000 of transport disappears. So some of that could get better before the end of the year. It could also get worse. But assuming we have to add $200,000 to that line. So all those items, again, just those, what was that, 7 items, is coming up to close to 1.7 million, a 4.5% increase to our operating expenses, assuming no other revenues from the state, which again, we're going to have to make a flat assumption. That'd be my suggestion. For our tentative budget, that's a 6.17% increase to the town assessments. So I think that should be nothing more than just setting the scene for what we're going to jump into full tilt after the holidays.
Thank you. Policy Subcommittee. The advocacy role of the school committee to consider and approve a listing of issues identified by the policy subcommittee about which the school committee would wish to adopt an advocacy role and to agree to action to be taken. Annex 12 in your packet. Could we have a motion to approve and to consider and approve a listing of the issues identified by the policy subcommittee, as I just said?
I'll make the motion.
Could we have a second?
I'll second it.
Is there any discussion?
I think we were going to add to this list the stadium as well as the Whittier students, correct, Mr. Farmer?
That's correct. We also discussed the fact that we have a number of potential targets. Local community, the stadium, our local representatives, how and when do we meet with them to make them aware of our concerns? Do we start working on federal representatives, Seth Moulton and co, because there are going to be some federal budget issues around. Do you advocate to the Board of Elementary and Secondary Education on issues? How do you use the local media and the media that you control as vehicles for advocacy? And if I may, with your permission, Linda, I recently had a correspondence from the MASS asking for suggestions for matters that might be considered as part of changes to legislation, and that had me thinking more about this. And if I may share some of the things that I shared with them. Enable the costs of regular, planned medical support for students in school to be charged to family medical insurance. That $300,000 cost is
100 of it's a nurse.
24/7 care, 18 hours a day plus medical, and the current view is that is providing access to education, and therefore we cover the cost. But arguably, those are essentially medical costs. Where a hospital has a medical facility in a high school, the services provided by the hospital, as distinct from the school nurse, can be charged to family health insurance. I've talked to Senator Tarr about that. He tells me that there would need to be legislation to make that possible, but it would shift a very considerable burden of school districts onto family medical insurance. Adding to this, this list, it talks about circuit breaker, full funding, and the threshold, but we should be including special education transport in the circuit breaker. It's not at the moment. We have real difficulties in the costs arising from families making independent decisions about where their students with special needs are educated, and then requesting the district to fund. very often the arbitrators, quite frankly, do not do a good job. In fact, we know of at least 2 special education attorneys who are going round talking about one of our cases as a really great example of where an arbitrator got it completely wrong. I'm suggesting that there ought to be panels of people who have experience in public education and special education, rather than it being an arbitrator who may or may not have that background. I think that will create some much better decisions. I mentioned earlier on today my concern about the lack of places in vocational high schools. I think the state should establish a commission to look at that issue, given that there are so many children who don't get the opportunity that they believe that they should have. And this will be worthy of debate for a long time. You'll know that there are wealthy districts who spend far, far more than the state target, but still get their 17 and a quarter, 0.5%. There are systems where states set a band of expenditure that's a target, and if communities elect to spend more than the upper part of that, their state aid is reduced proportionately. So maybe instead of getting $1, they get 75 cents. And the 25 cents that's freed up can then be used to support districts which don't have cash. Now, that would obviously require a fairly fundamental look at the way that towns and cities are funded, but that would be a way of addressing the inequity in terms of relative spending as between municipalities on public schools. So those are the things which I ran off the top of my head with a chat with Brian. Whether or not you would want to augment this list with some of those, I share them with you. I think this is something that's going to be worthy of fairly regular discussion as things crop up. How do you respond to particular circumstances?
I'm somewhat, I don't know if confused is the right word, but it was very simple to add the stadium advocacy and Whittier condition that advocacy on here. I'm not quite sure to do with what to do with what you just said.
Maybe you refer what I've just suggested to the policy committee for the policy committee to have some extended discussion on.
Because again, as you just said, I think this is going to be a changeable list. Some things may stay there for indefinitely, and others may move off the list. So I'm not sure to consider and approve a listing of the issues identified. Absolutely, we can approve this. I mean, that would be my opinion, but knowing that it will change from time to time. And my question would be, if the policy subcommittee has another issue that they would like to recommend, that be brought forward to the full committee? I'm asking.
Well, I think it's because if you look at Mr. Farmer's report, he does a lot of letter writing and advocating for our district. And we as school committee members we made this list to come up with things that possibly the school committee can be doing. So if we see some of these, he put in some of these timelines here, that maybe we as a policy committee can start a letter or something, and we'll send it out to you, and we can get a letter together and send it as the school committee. Exactly. So that's the type of stuff that we're trying to put in here. So we'll be giving you more information, and if anyone knows of any other advocacy that we should be adding to this list, this could be a running list of what we start attacking.
So we need a motion to consider and approve a listing of issues identified by the policy subcommittee about which the school committee would wish to adopt an advocacy role and to agree action to be taken. That's as written. That's what we have. Could we have a motion on that so we can get it out to discuss?
I'll make a motion.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Is there any discussion on that motion?
Could I say my understanding was that this was something the committee was going to do, not something that the administration was going to do. Patty's put round the table the contacts for our local legislators, and you'll know that politics works on the basis of the squeaky wheel. And I think the question is, are there going to be issues where you collectively agree that you want to do something about it, and then agree how you're going to do it and who is going to do it?
Oh, I think Linda just said that the intent was that, not that you would do it. You're already doing your.
I didn't see a lot of nodding.
Okay, but Linda, I think, was very specific, saying that this would be for, and that's why we have the contact information for us as school committee members.
Well, I think this is new to all of us, being advocating for these things and I think it's because of all the unfunded mandates that we have started coming up with a list.
I think the role that the administration might have will be to provide you with a briefing on the items. Do they call them elevator conversations these days? What you can say in 2 minutes that would influence somebody. We can certainly provide you with briefings on these.
So I guess my question would be, how would it come about? I mean, individually we can lock on to an issue we feel strongly about and bring it to the committee, but is the policy subcommittee going to be on a more regular basis addressing these kinds of things rather than just our school policy? And almost like on a monthly basis, we'd be calling our legislators over whatever hot topic of the day it was? Are we going to just do this individually, or are we going to agree as a committee?
Well, I think what it was is we're not going to have a lot of policy issues coming up. So I think that the policy committee is going to be taking, I'm sorry, they're going to be taking some of these issues and possibly coming up with ideas and then distribute them, and we all come up with a collective idea and then make a.
I don't see any harm at all in us acting individually and as a group. The more contacts, the better.
I can't even talk.
Is there any further discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Unanimous. Thank you very much. Next, to consider the district support for students representing the district in team and individual competitions at national levels. Could we have a motion to consider and approve a new policy on district support for students representing the district in team and individual competition at the national level as a first reading, as recommended by the policy subcommittee in its meeting on December 2nd, 2014?
I'll make a motion.
Do we have a second? Thank you, Dick. Is there any discussion? Monique?
What happens if the kids don't raise the other 20%? Like, it says the district will contribute approximately 80% of the anticipated costs, excluding meals and incidental costs, which will be met by the students. Like, what happens if they can't raise it?
Shall I give you the background to this? Last year, the cheerleaders won the state and were going to go to somewhere warm for a national competition. And we were faced with the question that, well, how far does the district support students at national competition? We had a discussion at the time and came up with a memorandum that looks very much like this, as something that seemed reasonable under the circumstances. In the event they didn't go because there was one or more of the young women were injured and that they wouldn't have been able to perform, so this became moot. It became alive again. Actually, there were other issues last year. We sent 2 students to California to the DECA Nationals. New Balance. Did we send? Did we?
We didn't.
No, we didn't. What we've tried to do is define our support as being for individual students or teams who are state champions This year, the cheerleaders came fourth in the recent competition. They had a qualifying score to go to the nationals. Under these arrangements, they wouldn't go because they were not the national champions. So this is trying to tease apart those individuals and teams that we would support. It's difficult because the MIA doesn't actually believe that students should be representing their school once they get out of the MIA framework. They're not supposed to wear their school uniform. It's ridiculous. So this was an attempt to kind of create something that would be manageable. It's written as a memorandum at the moment rather than as a policy, because that's the way it was originally constructed. It says it's a pilot basis. It says it's limited to Triton students because we are in some co-ops, and if we had a co-op that became a state champion, and we were the kind of ruling district that was organizing it, it would be difficult to justify paying for Georgetown and Newburyport students to go to a competition. I think we'd have to face that when we got to it. But the 80%, to go back to Monique's question, was based upon what looked reasonable at the time last year in terms of what the students would raise, and what the district would underwrite. So this is the best that we've got at the moment, but I think given that the issue has been raised more than once now over the past 18 months, it's something that really ought to be a matter of policy rather than the administration trying to come to something which makes sense.
And Monique's question was, what happens if they don't raise the money?
Well, I think they don't go.
Right. That would be what I would think too. Any other discussion on the first reading? Dina?
Can I just ask a question? How did you come up with the 80% mark?
This was a discussion that took place over a year ago. We asked that they were already doing some fundraising, and we came up with a figure that looked reasonable. I couldn't justify it in any actuarial way.
I think there was the cost of the trip was about $1,000 a student, and we were saying it made sense a student could come up with a couple $100, and that would have us coming up with $800 per student. Like Christopher said, I don't think there was not any serious mathematical equation.
But just playing devil's advocate here, shouldn't part of that be the responsibility of the team booster organization to fund students or teams that are moving beyond the state level?
I mean, my guess is those boosters would have a significant involvement in raising that 20%. That's my guess. But I think that the spirit behind this document, and again, as Christopher said, it's not teams or individuals who make qualifying scores. It's if there's a state champion.
Mm-hmm.
If we Triton are state champions in fill in the blank, whether it's an academic competition like DECA or it's the cheerleading, that was the other example, then we want to support that. That's a good use of our funds to promote them at the national level.
I'm not disputing that.
Right.
I'm just raising questions. My last question regarding that.
Can I just add something to the first question? If we were going to write a role for the boosters in here, we would need to have an agreement with them as to what proportion they would think would be reasonable. If we put it onto the students, then it leaves it open to individual students to raise money, boosters to help, get sponsorship, a variety of things. But putting the boosters in here, we would need to meet with them and agree a figure that they would see as a reasonable target.
Okay. The last question I had regarding this is, I'm really confused as to why the MIAA wouldn't think that if a student moves on that they shouldn't be representing their school. But be that as it may, if we do decide to do this, would there be any conflict with them? Would we get these kids or these teams in any I
think the administration that you have and our athletic director are in agreement that many of the things that the MIA stipulate don't make sense, and we will probably follow the Nelson remedy, ignore them.
Not get them in any trouble.
Okay.
Possible
I mean, if a student wants to wear a Triton outfit to go and wrestle in some national competition, the students, First Amendment, should be allowed to choose what they wear.
Is there any more discussion on the motion? On the move, on the discussion, on the motion? No? All those in favor? Opposed? Before I ask for a motion to adjourn, I want to wish everybody here and everybody out in our listening audience a wonderful, happy holiday season, and enjoy your next 4 weeks. January will be busy. Could we have a motion to adjourn?
Make a motion.
Second. Any discussion? All those in favor? Good night.